You said they open in,
June 1st and July 1st, that's when there's a couple of deadlines for people to put in their deposits. And some people change their minds by then, and Croydon kids get a priority because seats open up.
And you mentioned to me that there's a business.
Sarah and Mike, we're online too, so.
Chris, they also mentioned to me in a conversation that they're in the midst of trying to make a business decision also because of some of the uncertainty, whether or not they may limit the number of upper grade levels because they have a big list of waiting list for the young kids, and use that as classroom space perhaps for that. So, I think we have to keep that in mind. That's part of the issue.
so they may be prioritizing the younger children.
Yeah.
But that for them is your younger grades. I mean, that's maybe through grade 5, right? Is that?
Well, if they bring in a preschooler, it would be preschool to 8.
Right.
So,
Well, right. So that's what I learned about that.
And as far as our children that are already there, they're holding seats for those.
Correct, till July 1st, that's our deadline, that's right. And if any parents pull out, then those seats open up too.
Okay.
I got the contract for the Prenda state contract, the contract that Prenda has with the Department of Ed. And, it basically says that they shall ensure that they're in compliance with the administrative rules, section 306, minimum standards for public school approval, and that they must, so they are. And there's no problem with them being the main delivery of education. That's basically what it says. So if anybody has any issues with that, they can let me know what they are, let us know what they are, and we can try to resolve them as we move forward. The part, it was kind of interesting, the part that said that they can go back to a classroom, that part was the subcontract with the district. So we would be the subcontract to the state with Prenda. And basically, we will have to sign a contract with the state, and it's all negotiable, whatever is in there. So, if we're offering it as a main thing, then there isn't a regular classroom that they could go back to, and that is okay. So that's how that will work. So that, people saw that, but it wasn't in the actual contract. So those are 2 updates. And you have to supply a face-to-face environment. That was a law recently passed, this year, apparently, or maybe last year, I'm not sure. But this qualifies as a face-to-face.
Just states that you have to provide a location.
A location, that's right, yep. Because, one of the points that was made is that a lot of the curricula that are used even in the traditional schools, they use online curricula. So, yeah.
Can I ask, Jody, with the face-to-face, does it have to be with a certified teacher, or can it be with God?
Prenda qualifies for all these things, so, and there will be a certified teacher. Everybody's thinking there isn't, but there has to be in the rooms, yeah, and around, and available, so. Yep.
Is there any way to do the microphone to the volume?
Yeah, because I couldn't hear what you said. And who provided those answers to those 2 questions? I can hear that.
The contracts and the RSAs.
I didn't know what you said, sorry.
Can you give us a short synopsis of what you just said to me?
Yeah.
Nobody can hear you.
Yeah, sorry.
Prenda is required, you can hear me now, yes.
Yeah.
Prenda is required to be in compliance with the New Hampshire Administrative Rules, Ed 306, minimum standards for public school approval. They also are required to have a certified teacher. They will have guides also, but there will be a certified teacher. That's the general thing that I found out. Yep. And so that's it for my housekeeping. I don't want to allow public comment while we work because we have to get through the ideas. We're going to go through these. The budget ideas, brainstorm some ideas, maybe we can work out some things. We wanted Beth to be here, but then at the last minute she got called out for a family emergency, so she can't, so we might have to do this again with her. So we'll see what we can get through today. And yeah, so I'm gonna
opportunity to go over the model that had been put together, so that she could understand the different moving pieces and give her opinion and poke holes and see where there may be any mistakes. We spoke primarily about the micro school model, since that's the most viable right now. We went through each section of the budget and made a few edits, nothing major. And I guess the bottom line is she now has a good handle over the different moving pieces and what the model is, and is comfortable with what I put together. So just to summarize, to take it in pieces, K through 4 would be keeping Croydon Village School open. We would be using the Prenda Micro School for instruction and curriculum. That cost comes to $5,000 per student, which is covered through a grant program at the state. And then we would have one teacher on staff covering primarily special needs, and also being there for assistance with the general education as well. We then talked about grades 5 through 12. That in this model would be maintaining school choice, and the tuition cap would be reduced to $9,000. The guaranteed in-person option that we would be able to cover would be the micro school option, which again would be through TiPod, and that would basically be an online school of the family's choosing, with the option of having an in-person experience, a place where they go with other children for socialization, for enrichment, community involvement and whatnot. But really at the core of the model, it's school choice with a cap of 9,000.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yep.
I don't remember whether any of your models included the cost that would be incurred to maintain the internet for operating with the kind of internet. Did we include something that would boost it? Because I know right now, unless you're using the Wi-Fi for the town hall here, there is no service out here for.
Yeah, I mean, there is, I think I might have left the internet line the same, but I did include an allowance for rent and whatnot related to the micro schools, which is a pretty hefty, I think I left it at 60,000. But basically each location would need to have a stable internet connection. If you wanted to get the fastest for this area, it would be like a Starlink. So you have an initial cost there of, I think it was raised there, upfront equipment cost to $600, and then it's $100 a month after that. So you could conceivably depending on how many pod locations you had, if they didn't have an internet connection, we could supplement with that.
The
So
school
there's
does
a-
have internet, by the way, it's not just
Yeah.
the town.
Yeah, but they don't have, 30 kids trying to use the internet all at one time, and that very well could.
Plus, how we talking about grades 5 through 12?
So we would, right, so that would be something that we have to look into. In the grand scheme of things, that's not gonna be a large dollar item. We already have an internet bill over there that's in the budget. We could conceivably replace it with something like a Starlink. So I forget what the line item was, but I'm pretty sure it's at least $100 a month, which is what Starlink charges.
It's gone up.
So.
So you're looking at Starlink.
So yeah, we're not having any public comment, thank you.
We're trying to understand, just so that we can ask good questions at public comment, so we're trying to, what internet service are you thinking of potentially using? Because we're all living in
So
Croydon.
you just said Starlink.
Thank you, that's all we're confirming.
And I was just letting you know.
There were other
the cost
people's-
has gone up.
Did that answer your
Yes,
question?
and Aaron already said that, yep.
No, he did not, thank you.
I heard him, but yeah.
That answer your question?
I think so.
Okay.
So, I'm sorry, who's supposed to be letting people in the meeting, because I'm just, sorry, there's somebody trying to get in, who's
There
waiting to be
is,
accepted.
anybody who connects can join, there's no approval required for this. We have 12 people in there right now, I
because that's what this meeting is.
Okay,
If they're on the Google one, that's not right, that's not started with this.
okay, thank you.
So yeah, I was just trying to give a, I guess, a high level view of the model, just to understand the main pieces.
Right.
Where else? Okay, so, I'll just go down the main categories. Regular instruction we talked about, left in everything that's currently there for supplies, printed material, things of that nature are still there. The
Did you
tuition,
send that to us?
I think I copied you when I sent it to Beth, and there weren't really much changes. to it.
Ages ago.
No, this week.
I remember.
Pretty sure I copied you. If not, I can send it to you afterwards.
You're talking about what the numbers you're looking at?
Yeah, I sent it to Beth, I think on Monday.
Can you send it to the rest of us?
I thought I had.
No, looks like you sent it to me and Jody.
Oh, actually, yeah, you did, I see it.
I'll forward it to you right now.
It was ages ago.
No, it's ages ago, you're looking at the wrong one.
No, I'm sorry, Monday was ages ago.
Oh. Alright, so, sure, there have been some modifications, but nothing major. Special ed, I think I mentioned, we left a, person in there. Contracted services are the same, supplies are the same, dues, fees, travel, all the same. This budget category is largely just, actually goes up a little bit, not by much, but a slight increase. Testing, we put back in the $2,500, which I originally had taken out, but I understand now is a state requirement for a specific test. So that's back in.
What line are you on? So I can catch up.
Section 3, testing, line 160.
And you're in the model?
Yeah.
I don't see section, oh, there you go, down here, okay, got it.
And it's under
Yeah, but
the microphone. Health, it's a pretty small category, $500.
So,
That
no,
one's,
I'm sorry, so total guidance, you said K, there's nothing under K for total, for guidance.
oh, because Beth and I added it back in. This is the one that I sent before.
Got it, got it.
So there, yeah, there were some small changes. I'll call those out as I go. Health, $500. Curriculum development staff, that is always 0. Library, books, that's a grant and library card program, that's $950, left that the same. Information services, that was taken down to 0. Beth thought that was reasonable, so we left that as a 0. School board, we left the same, that's $10,900 for stipends and meetings and legal services and auditors and whatnot. SAU, that one was not dropped, that was left the same, $10,900. Yeah. And I did look at the sheet you sent me, and I could give you specific changes to yours.
Yeah, I'll catch him off the.
Yeah. The SAU office, so the actual expenses were largely left the same. The salaries are different. We assumed one administrator in this budget, and they're split between, partially between the SAU office and then the principal category. So I think that's a 75-25% split. Benefits, these were all taken down. The only benefits in here would be FICA, workers' comp, and unemployment, based on the hours that the staff would be expected to work. And federal grants was left the same. I think, Frank, you had 0 in there, but I think we already had a $7,500 grant approved for
Yeah, they
special
just
ed.
balance out, it doesn't.
Yeah,
Yeah, it doesn't.
it doesn't have a bearing on it.
I mean, if you get a grant, you put it in here, that's all, yeah.
Operate. Operations of the building, this is pretty much the same. There's a minor difference, but I can't even remember what it was. It's pretty small.
$2.
Yes. But it basically left this one the same. Transportation also left the same. Beth asked me about the field trip line, if that would be there, it's only $1,000, I left it in. I know that both of the 2 micro schools, they do community type activities as part of their enrichment stuff, so, they could conceivably be doing field trips, so I just left that there. Food services, left that the same, $11,525. And transfers to food service, I had 0 there, and that I had to add back in. That's $9,500, and that's like a reconciliation between the expense side and the revenue side. So that just needs to tie back to Beth's other spreadsheet. But I didn't really understand what this section was doing, so she explained that to me. So the bottom line comes out under this to $937,000 rounding up. And, there's no real safety margin into this budget, so it would, I would expect there be things that come up that push this a bit higher. But for modeling purposes, it comes in at $937,000. And Beth was more or less on the same page with me on that after we went through all the moving pieces. And our plan, where we left it, was just to have a discussion today as a group. So that's the quick version. I don't know if you want to go into any specifics.
So
Or
you basically
alternatives,
you just budgeted it, and I missed some of the beginning ones, so I
Yep.
didn't see what you got, but you just basically budgeted 9,000 for all tuition kids after 5th through 12th.
Right, so similar to
Whether
our,
it's higher.
right, similar to our method with Newport, where we budget we assume all children would go to Newport because that's the highest, worst case scenario for the budget. To keep things simple, we just use the same methodology, so we assume that everybody's going to cost $9,000. There are certain programs that could cost less, but in all likelihood, they probably wouldn't be opting for those, and it would be $9,000.
Look at that.
Yeah,
So we got for VLAX, for example, right?
yeah, they could, yep.
VLAX, I mean, on this, because I was looking at everything VLAX is rated like 6th best school in the state. I mean, that's pretty good.
So,
And it could also, VLAX could be, a good partner program with something like the technical school down the street. You could do VLAX to satisfy a core curriculum, and then you have money left over and the $9,000 to go enroll directly over there. So there's ways you can mix and match these and stay within the budget.
so Aaron, I think on line 74, 75, you're seeing the 120 for Prenda and the 120 rebate back from the state for Prenda, so that is what brings us to the total 137, so we're no longer getting a rebate from the state for Prenda, it's gonna be over 1. Is that how I'm understanding?
Yeah, that would be a safe assumption over 2 years.
Total tuition K-12 is $413.
K-12 total tuition is, you gotta add the high school and K-8, so that comes out to $519,000.
Wait, doesn't the same thing happen with Chi, that the state pays for?
The state is currently in talks with Chi to possibly cover up to, I think, 20 students. And they said that they'd be happy to allow Croydon to take those slots. I don't think it's been made official. And again, in the interest of just assuming worst case, I didn't want to count on that in the model. So,
Okay. But that is interesting.
for example, if you go to Montessori, you wouldn't be getting that rebate, so.
Yeah, so it's still
Yeah.
on, it's a bit short, yeah, okay. Got it.
Right, so that would be a potential, if you actually took advantage of that fully, that would be worth $100,000 that potentially comes back from the state. And that's not included in this budget.
Which, that's interesting.
No. So that would bring the first couple of years cost down to 837.
Yeah, it would bring it back to the $800,000 range. Let's see what else.
Right, you'll send us that updated one out.
Mhm.
Aaron,
Yeah,
you
last thing I had mentioned was that the state is currently in talks with Kai about offering a similar sort of reimbursement of those costs, and they would potentially cover up to 20 students in New Hampshire, and they said that they would give Croydon first dibs on that, basically. So that hasn't been made official, but if that was something that came our way, that would work out to about $100,000, because the cost of Kai is $5,000 per child. So the state would potentially cover up to 20 children.
Grants like Brenda's, or the state has for Brenda.
Sorry?
It's like a grant that they're gonna.
Yeah, pretty much, yeah. And I think that, we'll have to confirm this with them. I haven't actually asked them this directly, but I think that they just bill the state directly. I don't think it comes to us and then we have to get like a grant back. I think it bypasses, but that's more of a, you know, nuts and bolts question. It doesn't really have any bearing on the cost of the town.
Right. And so you just talked about this one model like that, right?
We focused on this model because the other ones, as we discussed before, they have some pretty glaring holes in them that make them pretty tough. I mean, going to full school choice, basically it's I can't think of, unless you guys have ideas, but I can't come up with any ideas for how you get an in-person free option for K through 3. That's a pretty big problem.
Say that again?
Like if you went full school choice, that was one of the models we were looking at, yeah, there'd be no in-person option at that budget point for K through 3. Because Chi starts at 4. And the reason that they've said that they do that is just that the lower ages require a little bit more hand-holding, and obviously,
Right, so the next question would be, what if we went to a K-3 school, right? And how would that work? And then start with 4, right?
So if you changed Croydon Village to a K-3?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's an option, of course, but the thing that,
Saving a whole lot of, probably wouldn't saving a whole lot of cost on operating for the village.
it would cost us more, yeah. I didn't run the numbers, but one of the reasons that this plan works is because of the Prenda's cost structure, and especially with there being grants available in these first couple of years, you would be giving up that money that's coming in from the state. So it might make more sense in 2 years. But for right now, Prenda's allowing the cost to come down such that you can have more left over for tuition in the upper rates.
Okay.
Let me ask you a quick question about the SAU office. You've got $50,000 in for a salary, and you've got $25,000 in for contracted service. I'm gonna assume the $50,000 is for your administrator, and the $25,000, I don't know what's the contracted service.
Yeah, I mean, these numbers still need to be vetted out. They're probably on the low side, so like I said, I think that the numbers actually going up.
What's the contract?
So
I
the,
don't think you'll get anybody to work full-time for that, especially with no benefits. And I don't see any retirement, and a full-time person is gonna legally require retirement, so. Non-SAU.
yeah, the 50 and the 50 and the 25 is for the administrator. That's split between 2 categories.
For the,
The 50 and the 25 would be
The
for
2
one
salaries in the SAU and the principal's office, I think is what he's referring to.
Right, so there's one in there for 75 total for one person.
So that's under the choice.
Line 210 is 50, and line 221 is 20.
looking,
You're looking at
In the SAU category, there's one that's 50,000.
yeah,
That is, that's 75% worth of the full person. So the other piece is in the principal category, so you have to add the 50 and the 25.
for the one person.
For the one person.
75,000,
Yeah.
for somebody to do all of that.
Right.
And then-
That's gonna be full-time, right? I mean,
You have
right now,
benefits.
we're probably over that, is that 80? Only because I contractually work for you, requirements is gonna be 100% of an employee, because you're gonna need to have somebody here full-time. As well as the work requirements, so you're probably gonna have to add in the 20% retirement on that. As a mandated benefit. I'm surprised Beth didn't catch that.
Well, we talked about that, and, we said that the model would have to depend on, staying below those thresholds.
It's a lot of step problems, so I mean, I just don't think it's doable from an administrative point of view, knowing the hours, and knowing what's required. I think you know. But as you said, you're gonna have to go up.
Yeah, it might have to go up, and, as we've talked in other meetings, well, actually, you weren't here at the last meeting, we talked a little bit more about, the concept of deficit spending. I think we all know that there's going to be some deficit spending, even in this model. You're looking at 130,000. But if this thing has to go up more, I mean, we go up quite a bit, actually, and even with some deficit spending, you would still be below what, it would have been previously. Of course, we're having some internet issues. I like that it's Zoom, because we tend to have more with Zoom than the.
Oh, then the last one, yeah. Okay. Well, we have a good place to start then, right? This model is a good place to start.
Yeah, definitely, yeah.
Great, thank you for doing all that.
Yeah, I think, how the math work out, I think in order to, prevent any deficit from this year causing next year's costs to go above the 1.7, you have to be below, I believe, 1.5 or 1.4 this year.
Okay.
So there's a fairly decent room to go before you really start getting back into territory where we were at before. And Zoom's back up. Let me flip back to yours. I think most of what you had in yours, Frank, tied up to mine. Under regular instruction, we had 80 students at $9,000, so that was where we had our biggest difference. Because, just the cost structure is different for Prenda, it's 5,000, not 9,000, and we're getting some money back from the state.
Right.
And, yeah, and then, guidance, we had added back in, we covered that. Information services, we covered that. Benefits, we just talked about that, and then, your number for rent on the PI spaces was actually less than mine. You had 20,000, I had 60.
I had no idea. I did it to a few rooms someplace for $1,000
Yeah.
if you get lucky. Yeah.
And your number came out to just under 1.3.
Right.
Yeah.
That was for their rate, 9,000.
Yeah. All right, so other questions from you guys?
I don't have anything right now.
Kevin?
I'm still scrolling through it.
You're what?
Still scrolling through it, just kind of reviewing the details and.
Let me see if there's any assumptions that didn't cover. I think we went through it. I mean, there's not a lot of complexity to the model itself, so, I mean, there's not a whole lot to really go through, I guess.
So there's no, so looking at the top, where you have the numbers, of kids, lines 59 through 61, and that's the numbers you're working with, so that only comes to 75 kids.
I think I took that from the original budget, but it might have changed since then, I'm not sure. Do you have updated numbers?
Maybe have my numbers, I just did some averaging based on the report that I went to use the numbers, so I just use 80 as a.
80, and 80's
So
a good,
you got 5 as a row number.
I like 80 just to.
Yeah, I mean, so where would I, where
Could
do you
even
want
go
me to,
85 just for that buffer, you know?
where would you want me to add them? Right now I have 24 in K4. What would you want me to increase that to?
I put 2 there.
Just 2 more.
26. And then I had 30 and 5 through 8. You just add 2 more there, is that spread it evenly across? I mean, that one's not gonna matter really whether it's, if they're all in the same, under the same model. So I'll put 32 there and I'll put 23. So that adds 6, so now you're at 81. And then that moves the model to 973,000 with those added kids. So realistically, I was thinking that, it probably, in reality, ends up, anywhere from $1 million to 1 point, and would be pretty safe, once it's all said and done. So that covers the model, and then obviously there's a discussion around, the merits of the programs themselves and whatnot.
Sure, but, sorry, I'm still looking through this. So rent per pod per month, it says 1,000. So how many pods do you think? I don't know what it is. Oh, I see.
Yeah,
We have 6 pods.
6 pods, based on 8 to 10 children per pod.
And that's maximizing it. Like if it-
I think I just, I divided it out and then I rounded up to the nearest whole number, so, which should work. And then I assumed 3 for K through 4,
I see.
which would cover you for up to 30 kids.
For K to 12 pod. And the Kai pods, the grouping depends, right, on things like interests or abilities or whatever, right? And they try to group them in interesting ways.
Yeah, they try to group them by, like the curriculum of the school that they're in, but primarily by age, so that would be,
But
if
each
you've got a really
groups-
wide range of ages, they would probably group them by age clusters. And I would think that we would, or I imagine we would look at the long list of schools that are partnered and select like 2 or 3 that we really liked, and maybe they cover different types of curricula, so you could have one be like Montessori, one could be more your traditional classroom type curriculum, and then third could be, I don't know, something else. There's a bunch of different options, and maybe you negotiate rates with those 3. And that way you don't have such a lot of differences between all the kids that are in the room, because ideally you wouldn't have 10 kids on 10 different, entirely different programs.
Right, but then, I mean, so we're probably gonna offer some of the programs based on what looks appropriate, but we're not gonna give them a list of everything that Kai does, right? I mean,
Well,
that's a discussion to have with Kai.
Yeah, and Kai can work with any online program. It doesn't have to be their list either. It can be anything that you want. So I would think this would be a discussion with the administration, with parents, and figuring out
That makes
which
sense.
of the curricula make the most sense, which are kind of in our budget range. Most of them are pretty close to our budget range. And if you pick a few of them to negotiate bulk rates, then you can get them down. I mean, Montessori is one of the more expensive ones, unfortunately, but he did mention that, if we were to cut a deal with them, it would be a pretty big bump in their numbers, so it would work them to meet us, yeah.
So it would be less than 5,000? Is that what you're
Yeah, the actual enrollment into the online schools would be, depending on which one you chose, could be less than 5,000, and then you add the cost of the Kai on top of that. So combined, you get to the $9,000 number. So the Kai portion just gives you physical space, an adult with them, and enrichment activities that would be over and above what the online program itself offers. So you have 3 3 hours worth of independent study, and then the other half of the day would be enrichment, socialization, community activities and whatnot.
So people that can't do online would get special needs and get to go to the school, I would assume. And then the town would end up having.
I mean, I can't hear you.
So kids that can't learn online would then be labeled as special needs and go into the, that bucket and get extra money and go to school they need to go to? Is that what you're saying? 'Cause there are ways kids that can't learn online, so I'm just wondering if that would then turn them into the special needs bucket, and then the town then has to pay for that, because you can't deny them their services.
Frank, can you address that from a special needs perspective?
My hearing is talking is not great, so
So children that struggle to learn online, so like if you're in a public school system and you're struggling to learn the way that your teacher is doing it or the school is doing it, you get an IEP, you get a 504, you then become a special needs case. So if children are struggling with an online model, they will then become special needs, and then that goes into that different bucket that the town has to cover to pay, correct?
correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so
There's gonna be a
Yeah,
lot
so
of
those children are governed by their IEP teams. And those teams include professionals, and there are mandated, certain people have to be on there. For example, there has to be a special ed certified teacher. There has to be initially a psychological evaluation of full eval, determined by an evaluation plan that is done in a meeting with family and school officials and all those other people. But yes, that they have to, those services and those things have to be provided. If a child does not do well, the determination has to be why. So you have to answer the why, so it's not like automatic. It may be a reason why they didn't learn that has nothing to do with the online, it's just that they weren't learning.
You mentioned,
Something about school officials evaluating them. In this situation, who would those school officials
Well,
be?
somebody here will be, I'm assuming that the administrator that's hired here will be somebody who is a licensed special ed director. That person then would put those teams together. So that's going to add work to that person, because currently in our schools where kids are out, they provide the case management piece of that, which is pulling those teams together. And my role as director currently, I attend those as the LEA, or the legal representative of the Croydon School District, so that I make sure that the family's interests are, and the child's interests are represented, but also the school's interests are represented in getting value for the money that is spent. So, yeah, but that won't happen in this kind of a model. That'll have to all be done by the special ed person here. And that will mean, I'm guessing, I don't think any of these models provide psychological services or evaluators or any of that. So those people would have to be contracted to come in and do those evaluations.
Is there something budgeted for that?
Pardon me?
Is there a budget for that?
I mean, there's some money there, yes, because they pretty much maintained the special ed budget in what was just presented. But there isn't, so there's some money there that we currently use, but there isn't enough money to cover any kind of increase in those services. That would have to increase.
Right, and that would have to be covered out of deficit spending. But if we're starting in the 930 to 950 range, I mean, it's still a very reasonable budget, even up to 1.2 million or so. So I mean, there's certainly going to be things that come our way, and that might be one of them.
Reasonable is a relative term.
Could that budget be made available to the public that you guys are all talking about, we're all trying to follow audit in our
Actually,
ears?
it became a public document when the board started discussing it, so.
Can you make it available?
So can you restate that?
Yeah, I mean, I think I,
Or make copies?
distributed an earlier version of it, I'll just.
There would have to be a few lines, like some of the notes that you have in there.
Maybe people's names and
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah,
Yeah.
sure. Well, I just do what I did before, because I distributed it before, and I just put it into the best format and cleaned it up, so, I'll just do that same exercise.
Why would we do it differently for actual needs of children versus an online model that you guys are requesting?
My understanding for, requesting emergency funding from the Superior Court is that you have to show, that you need to spend the money right away, and you don't have the cash in the bank, so.
Well, that would happen as a special needs case.
And then you could do that at that time.
We
You
also
couldn't do
have-
it now.
Yeah, we
You,
also,
you said that what would happen is that if we had kids that were with special needs, it would go into deficit spending. But that's not actually the case. We actually could apply for special funding. Just like.
Right, yeah, at that time you could.
so we
Yes,
also.
thank you. That was my question, Julie, thank you.
So we also have a special ed trust fund for exceptional cases that we didn't account for. So we can go in there rather than go to deficit spending.
Honestly, what I see, Julie, is that you don't really care about what kids need. You're caring about what you want. So that's why I was asking Aaron, not you. Thank you.
So,
Okay.
Aaron, you heard me, right?
Yes, yes, and we actually have a few different, funds, I mean, they're not, none of them are massive, and we get, yeah, I think we have 3 different funds, got tuition fund,
There's 137,000.
yeah. How much, 130? Okay, so that's not small, that's,
That would cover out of district places.
Right.
Probably for a year.
For one kid.
One kid.
so that's encouraging, and we could certainly use it for something like she's talking about if we.
It depends how that person is written.
Okay, yeah. Alright. Well, that's good to know, because I think the other,
How long
there's
has
a
it
few
been
other.
37 to build up?
I'm sorry?
How long has it been to build up the 37 in that trust fund?
How long ago?
Where did that trust fund come from? Is that from surplus and built up over years, or is that?
Not typically. I mean, typically what we do at the district meetings, and this year we felt that the 137 was enough. But typically we just add to it as a separate warrant at the meeting.
So it's specifically put in?
Yes.
Yeah, so if we used it this coming year, I mean, say we depleted it, we could just put it back on our warrant articles each year, start building it back up. But that's good to know, because
That would still be part of the funding for the school, so you would have to have a second warrant on top of the 200,000 or whatever,
no, we already have access to the 130.
No, I'm sorry, if you wanted to replenish it.
Oh, yes, yeah, that would be at next year's district meeting.
Right.
But what that would allow you to do is to, avoid needing to do deficit spending, at least right away. You could just dip in my trust.
Why would we, and is it okay to ask a question?
So if it's about the budget.
It is. Why would we allocate funds to a trust fund instead of just putting them in the initial budget to begin with?
It's for unplanned situations.
But this is obviously planned.
I mean, this was a hypothetical situation.
Well, hypothetically, if we have to do it every year, isn't it planned?
Yes, that would be.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you. I just wanted to make sure.
I don't understand the question.
If we had to allocate funds from a trust wouldn't that be a planned spending?
Okay, I mean, but we don't allocate funds every year. We get to.
But if you're talking about spending, that's what you were just talking about. Don't talk in circles with me, please.
I think she missed that part of the conversation. Aaron was saying that we could replenish it, but yes, you're right. If we planned on replenishing it every year because we want to spend it, that would then be planned spending and covered.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to make sure.
Built into the budget, absolutely.
Okay, thank you. That's all I wanted.
Right, if the budget was short this year, which a good chance that it is, we could use that, provided that, I mean, there's gonna be rules around what each of the trust funds can be used for, but if that's earmarked for special needs, you could use all of it if you wanted to. And then-
why would you earmark it just for special needs instead of putting it into the?
No, that's the trust fund, it is set aside for special needs.
Okay.
Yeah.
And it's there for, again, for the unplanned. So if we find
Yep.
out that we're getting an out-of-district placement before the budget is finalized,
Yep.
then we put that in the budget. We don't go to the trust fund for it, right?
Okay.
It's
So
only if
this-
it happens in the middle of the
so-
year that we can then access it.
So correct me if I'm wrong, but this trust fund was set up so if, for instance, a new family moves in that has a special needs child that we didn't anticipate,
Exactly.
we have the money to cover.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Sometimes they're way more than 137,000.
Right.
I'm sorry, what was that, Frank?
He said sometimes they're way more than 137,000.
Okay, thank you.
The point being that there's some money there that we can have access to.
Can I ask a question about your time, please?
Sure.
Are there any requirements for the students? So we have a certified teacher, but much like with public school, is there a requirement for how many students per certified teacher in the actual face-to-face? So if we have 30 kids, is it appropriate for there only to be one certified teacher, or is there a cap?
Under the CHI program, the certified teachers would be provided by the online school that they would be attending.
So they wouldn't be, I thought Joe said they had to be in the classroom.
That, she was talking about Brenda for K through 4.
Premise K through 4 Chi is the upper grades.
Yeah.
Okay, so the upper grades don't actually have to have, they just get the guide.
So kind of.
They do, but they're actually getting their formal instruction from an online school, so those instructors would be certified teachers.
Well, now I'm confused now because I thought that you had said earlier that you found out that when they sign a contract with the state to be operating on the district level, they have to have a certified teacher.
That's
That's the
Brenda.
end of the contract. That's the only thing I talked about.
Okay.
Yeah.
So any contract signed with CHI might not fall under that rule.
Yeah.
So it's possible that we would have, I mean, so we have 80 kids in that school, there might only be one certified teacher that's just working with kids.
There wouldn't be 80 kids in that school, there would be the 20 to 30 in K through 4 in that school. And then the grades 5 and up would be elsewhere. We have to find locations for those micro schools.
So what's the requirement, what's the requirement for like guides for that? That's what I'm trying to, so yes, they're 5th through 12, but will my 5th grader be in there with
If you're asking about-
supervisor or a teacher?
They don't have to be certified teachers for that CHI coach role. The certified teachers would be provided by the online school.
I understand that, I'm talking about what sort of person, what sort of adult do they have to have with them in those pods?
18.
Well, they'd be able to explain that better when they come next week, but oftentimes they hire former teachers, so a lot of them do end up being certified teachers. They also will look at people who have experience as tutors. Sometimes even, basically the common thread is they're looking for people who have a history with individualized education. Doesn't necessarily have to be in a school setting, it can be a tutor or something like that.
And there's a ratio for how many students are in that other?
Yeah, they would have no more than 10 to 1.
And are they definitely coming next Tuesday?
They will be here on Tuesday.
I saw that Brenda was coming as CHI.
Brenda will be here as well. They will all both be here.
Okay.
Yeah. So we will have somebody representing each of the 2 micro schools. And I believe we'll also have at least one parent that has children that have gone through both programs. And I think that there may also be a guide coming, but I'm not sure about that. But they're trying to get as many different people so that, they all here can have the opportunity to ask questions directly. I think we're going to get a lot better insights from that, than just what we've learned on phone calls and internet searches.
Now, just as a question, I guess I could ask them then. Are the guides supposed to be recruiting students for their pods? It says so.
That does say that on their website.
It does say that right on the
is-
website.
That is for if a guide wants to set up a pod themselves and start a pod,
Yep.
then it is up to them to find people to join that pod. That's not what's happening here.
Okay.
We would be setting up. And
So this isn't some kind of like pyramid Ponzi
I
scheme?
think the biggest problem that we're gonna face is finding and hiring guides.
Yeah.
Oh, I think that's gonna be a problem too.
I think that's.
That leads to my question.
So, I mean, so we gotta talk one at a time, but are we segueing into public comment? Are we done with the budget? Any other?
This is a budget.
Michael?
you done with presenting your?
Yeah, I mean, it's a pretty simple model, from a, dollars and cents perspective. And, yeah, giving you all the big moving pieces. And like we talked, there's gonna be things that come up, whether it's additional special needs or whatever, or maybe salaries that need to go up. But right now, we're starting $936,000 range. And, I think we've all said we're comfortable with a certain amount of deficit spending to fill our goals later on. Of all the plans we've discussed, it certainly ticks the most boxes, and it's, so yeah, I don't really have anything else to talk about now. I think Tuesday's presentation will be much more focused on the education piece, which is more important than what we're talking about now with dollars and cents. So I think that'll be really the most important one to show up to. So Frank, do you have any other questions on the financial side?
Okay, so we're segueing into public comment. We're good? I mean, I don't think anything, I don't think everything is, yeah, no, I'm fine. I mean, I really wish Beth were here, but I'm really glad that she went through the budget and
Yeah.
that she was okay with it.
I mean, it was a really good conversation. We spent a good amount of time on the phone. We went through everything, and she seemed pretty positive, and she blessed it. So yes, too bad she couldn't be here, but hopefully she'll be here next week.
All right, so public comment, and we'll go no longer than a half hour. So it's 7:30.
Thank you. So I think this question is primarily for Frank, although I'd be happy to hear anyone's response to it. It's my understanding that there is a pretty significant shortage of special ed professionals in the state of New Hampshire and nationally. How probable is it that this role that seems to be very encompassing of all the parts of it, you said that normally they don't create the teams, do the case management, how probable is it that we can hire somebody with those qualifications for what this salary is?
I think that, I'll be totally honest with you. I think, as I commented earlier, the position is there, but there isn't enough funding. You can't. I mean, we struggle. We had to fill a single teaching position this past year. We got really lucky. Actually, it's the year before this. That we got really lucky and found Ashley, who happened to be moving, but we had no other applications at all. And school districts that used to get 25 applications for an opening, now we're getting 5 or 6. Even really high-paying districts are getting a few applications. So it is that any of these positions, some folks will take positions at a low hourly salary to get health benefits for their families. So they essentially, the Plainfield School, for example, they're ed assistants. The hourly rates are not great by any standard, but they have a very good benefit plan. And so a lot of folks, usually moms, will take those jobs for the family benefits. And the husband is working with some other job. But yeah, so I think it's going to be very difficult. I don't know that it's impossible, but I do think it will be extremely difficult to fill these positions.
Sounds highly.
I mean, Newport is
which
operating,
makes it.
Newport on professional salaries, very low salaries given. They have not been able to fill their teaching positions this year.
And that's still higher than what they're proposing here.
Oh, way, yeah.
Way higher. So they can't fill their positions at a way higher asking. So
What happens?
can I just ask that question, because that's on my list. What happens?
Sorry.
Other people can't.
Well, let's not forget that Frank here, has a principal's
on top of that, how many of you have taken a 25% hit in your paycheck?
Jody, can you talk to the mic, please?
I think the conversation was going in an inappropriate direction, so I don't think we're gonna repeat what was just said.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Do you want to figure out what we're talking about, so I'm gonna get off subject? So,
Yeah.
Tommy, you go first, and then I'll go first.
Well, I want to comment, my only half-hour public comment, that's kind of rubbish. I don't think that's appropriate, you know? The public's here to talk and we want questions answered. I think it's appropriate that we ask them and get them answered. But that being said, what does happen when that sort of, when we can't hire a teacher or we can't hire a superintendent? What is your contingency plan?
If you can't find the person or you can't find them at that price, then you have to raise the number and the deficit spend a bit more.
So that, I'll
Keep going, Tom, we're good.
because to me, you just keep saying deficit spending, deficit spending, deficit spending. Now, we talked about the detriment of deficit spending and how terrible it is last meeting. We keep on boosting this number up and up, and it's just, I'm just shocked at the willingness of being able, like, your willingness to go up and up and up to, like, say, close to 1.4 million, I heard you say, without kind of going crazy overboard. Well, then what's the point of everything that you're trying to do? Because if it's not for a political ideal, then, and it's really to save money, we're not saving any money here. If you're willing to deficit spend your way all the way up to $1.4, $1.5 million, then we should have cut that out of the original budget and do what the whole town here wants, which is keep the program that we have.
So,
But instead, you're willing to go all the way up to
can I
that
tell you
number.
to respond real quick, Tom?
Hold on,
Just
give
to
me a
what you
second.
said
You're
thus
willing to
far.
go all the way up to that huge number through deficit spending just to change public school system. I don't
So-
agree.
So where we're at right now, until May 7th happens, these meetings and these discussions on trying to meet an $800,000 budget have to happen. We've got to, we can't just not have meetings until May 7th just and wait and see
Yes,
what
but you
happens. right?
can stop
So-
backing a shit idea. That's, you can
okay.
stop doing that. You can start.
Yes. So, the way I see this going is if we go with Prenda and Kai as the model that we're gonna do, and that means we eliminate Frank's position, we eliminate Nicole, we eliminate Mary Beth, everybody at the school. They're all gone. And if we go into to Prenda and Kai and, you know, and this is assuming that May 7th comes and goes and nothing changes, right? So we would be put in the spot of having to try to spend only 800,000. The only way we could do that is, that I can see, is this model. This is the closest we can get to 800,000. We can't even reach that number. And let's say next year, everybody comes out for the vote and wants to increase the budget.
I understand.
Now
what
we're
you're
in
saying.
a position next year of saying, we want the school back, but who's gonna come work for Croydon?
Exactly. So we're destroying
And
the entire system.
even if we offer $200,000 a year for a teacher,
They're not gonna come anywhere near this.
nobody's coming near
And
us.
I get that. My
So,
point is we're willing
The
to deficit
point that I'm
spend.
trying to make right now is, don't slack off on May 7th. Just shut up.
Yeah, well, we get that.
What
We
are,
understand.
So, but until then, we've at least gotta work these models and try to figure out what
But
we
this
can
isn't
do.
this isn't a very viable model, is my point. If we're
I don't
willing to-
disagree
We're
with
willing
you.
to deficit spend up to
I don't disagree with
1.4 and destroy this school. It's not a viable.
Didn't you say last meeting, Kevin, that you would not back having Kai and Brenda?
I said I don't like it, yes.
No,
I do think if we're stuck with only 800,000, this is about the only model that we can even come close to that with. So if we're stuck with that, we're gonna be deficit spending one way or another. So we can deficit spend to the tune of twice what we're budgeting and then guarantee that next year our tax bill is gonna be astronomical and ridiculous.
But my
Or
question
we
is,
can
what
try to do
happens?
something to avoid that.
Back to my question, what happens when you don't get the teacher? Just deficit spend is your answer to that? And do you think that's gonna solve it?
The So to clarify the comment about 1.4 million,
No, I understood where the number came from. I want you to answer my question. What happens when you don't get the teacher, the certified teacher? Because I don't know anybody who would come to work for that really poor pay when every single school district in the area pays way more, and you've taken away every single benefit as well. So explain to me what the contingency plan is when you don't have a certified teacher.
There's benefits in there for the full-time.
not retirement and those ones.
This looks like an intentional tanking of this school, is what this looks like. I mean, there's no other way around it. This is an intentional tanking.
When you don't get that out. That's my question.
I mean, what does Newport do when they can't find a teacher?
They have other teachers that take over.
They have substitutes.
A lot better plan than you guys got.
So they double their workload?
Yes, that's what they do.
So if you have 0 teachers, you can't do that.
Sorry, I can't hear
You can't double workload.
multiple people. What?
You can't double workload with 0. If we don't have any educators, you can't double up the workload.
So, I mean, what Erin has been saying is we would have to increase it in order to attract somebody.
Which goes back to, why would we pay extra for an education model that the town doesn't want, when we could just pay for an education model that the town does want? Why would you even ask the town to do that?
Why not spend your deficit spending towards the model that we all
Yes.
want?
That would go astronomical, as Kevin just pointed out.
It wouldn't go astronomical, it'd go in the same ballpark that you're talking about deficit spending right now.
Exactly.
You go to 1.7.
Yes.
We could-
No, that would be astronomical.
If you
No,
took out
probably
the
not.
padding, which you have mentioned.
If what?
If you took out the padding, if you took just the kids who currently are enrolled in Montessori and Mount Royal, and you budgeted them at $10,000 instead of the 18, then you could bring the budget down to $1,525,496. So you've already shaved off quite a bit, and here we are in the ballpark of 1.5, which is where you guys were just getting.
Well, that's the maximum that Erin said. I don't think he was aiming to get there.
That's right. If you spent,
I think the point is, why cause all the disruption? Basically,
well, so what Kevin was just saying, if you spend in that ballpark, 1.5 to 1.7, and you're guaranteeing that next year's tax bill is going to be very high, you'll be able to add that deficit to the 1.5 or 1.7 that is next year. I don't know that we would have that. Yeah, I mean, 1.5 is a pretty far cry from $930,000.
This would be an educational disaster. My opinion. In my opinion.
Speak to the microphone, Fred.
Actually,
Yes, what I said was that in my opinion, that if this became a reality, I understand and I agree with Kevin, the importance of going through the exercise so that we enter of what we're, and that way it helps us to identify what the critical problems are. And in the end, as we start, every single one of them that has come up, the solution has been, well, we're going to have to maybe deficit spend a little bit or spend a little bit more. It's also, I can't imagine us abandoning choice for all those kids who are currently in programs 5 through 12. And if we have the conversations that I've had with superintendents, granted, not official, but one response from, the response from Sunapee was that, well, our board just met and we established our tuitions at 15 and 16 for next year, 1,000. A conversation with Claremont, our give or take, our tuition next year is going to be 16. And so I think might they reduce it a tiny bit? Maybe, but if they try to do that, they have to reduce it for every other sending school. I think we're asking them to do the impossible. And so that's why I call it magical thinking, because it's wishful thinking. I don't think it's possible to make all those things kind of happen. And that's why for me, if in the end we end up spending, 1.3, 1.2 instead of 1.5, for $200,000, we've caused a tremendous disruption to children's lives. We're having children starting to exhibit all kinds of symptoms of stress and trauma because of what we're going through. And it's not okay. Yes, do the exercise, but I would love to see this board endorse a positive vote on May 7th.
Your hand's been up for a while.
Have you guys thought about or talked to a lawyer if anybody's going to sue the school district if any of this happens? Like, I mean, the guy and parents are legitimate against it. Has any conversation happened? Is it feasible that you can have lawsuits that are going to come to the town?
And what the cost of it?
And what the cost is, and what the cost will be.
I mean, what we're looking at is all legal to do, so I'm not sure exactly what you're asking.
I mean, there's so many people in the town, I hate to say us and them, so at this point, it's an us and school board, even though we should be on the same team. We're against the guy, he's learning from us. So if collectively, if this passes May 7th, we fall on our face, which we won't. But have you thought about the repercussions of a possible lawsuit against the town?
Yeah, and we're trying to do things within the law, so I don't know what the lawsuit would be.
Well,
I mean,
they can still come, even if you don't have a law degree.
It's called negligence.
They'll come.
Well, we have talked to some lawyers. We've
All right, so
asked
what's the answer? We've asked this for many weeks. I want to see something from the lawyer that you guys are talking to, that our tax dollars are paying for. I want to see that this is going to, it's okay and legal to replace traditional public education. I want to see that. I don't want to hear that you looked at a permanent contract. I don't care what's in that. I want to see something from the lawyer that says this is okay to do. Because you haven't done it yet. We've asked this, but you guys cannot come to the table and say, here's a letter from a lawyer. I want to see it.
Do we want to go to the lawyer with this question?
Yes.
You should have already.
We've asked you several times.
We've asked from
Should have
the.
already.
You've asked the Department of Education.
I don't care.
What department?
They're not lawyers.
No.
Yeah, actually, some of them are lawyers in the Department of Ed.
You say you spoken to the Department of Education, but you've also said, well, I didn't know I was supposed to do that in front of people. I didn't know I could have a special meeting without telling me, which you did know, because you told us in the very first meeting, we weren't allowed for you and Aaron to discuss anything to do with the school board without it being public. So,
What I said,
what I'm saying to you, I have it all recorded, and I know.
well, I'm sure you do, but to be clear, what I said was that my understanding, and I've been told this by school boards, I've been on the school board for a long time, and you all know that, that you're not allowed to meet to deliberate. And that means making decisions, not gaining information. It was my misunderstanding. I apologize. It had never come up. I'm talking. You don't want
You
me
and
to.
Joe talked to her,
You don't want
asking
to.
the question.
What?
You talked to her, trying to ask her the question. Let her talk. So what I was trying to say to you was, you said that you didn't know these things and blah, 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 and then you found out after that it was wrong. So it's very difficult to trust what you are saying, that you spoke to the Department of Education, because you spoke to the Department of Education that day, and
So the
the
Department
Department of Education did not tell you that the two of you on the school board shouldn't be talking to him without it being public. So it's very difficult. We want to come aware that it's not much to ask. Just trying to explain. So either the Department of Education person should have known, or you or Aaron should have known that what you were doing was illegal.
In that instance, I get your point, but in that instance, I don't know that the DOE person should have known, because he doesn't know that all school board, any particular school board has one.
That's my exact point,
So-
that's why we're wondering. She's saying that
But-
the reason she doesn't need a lawyer is because she spoke to the Department
that was that two board members were trying to get information from them. We were doing research on all of the possibilities.
No, we were doing research on Brenda and Kylie, what your possibilities are, not what the town's possibilities.
Here, I'll make this simple. I'm gonna make a motion that we send an email to the lawyer asking him to do his due diligence and answer the question, is it legal for a district in New Hampshire to offer Prenda and Kai as the sole means of education for
Thank you. Thank you.
Sorry?
She needs a second. I made a motion.
Minutes for the, if we're making it open.
The folks that the folks that you talked to,
There's a motion on the table.
yeah, we're just discussing.
Well, it has to be seconded first.
Okay.
And you're taking.
Does it have to be seconded before it's discussed?
This is what yes, it has to be seconded before it's discussed, yes.
Okay.
Did somebody second it?
It's fine, I'm waiting for Aaron to be ready to
He's
take the
typing
minutes.
minutes now because we're officially doing motions again, so.
I will second that motion. But we needed to do this at a meeting because we couldn't do it in between meetings, so here we are.
We asked for a month to ask this question.
Well, we did ask him that question in conversation, and he wasn't sure. So now we will pointedly ask him to. It's just gonna take him some time to develop that answer because he's gonna have to do some learning. So it's gonna take some hours that is gonna be built to us.
You know what, just make a question 5 weeks ago.
So the question is if we can use Prenda exclusively as opposed to a supplemental program.
Brenda and Kai, as, can we use microschools as, yes, even.
Well, it would have to be Prenda and Kai in that conversation because we can't use one or.
Well, they're two entirely different models.
Yes, but we have to offer K to 12, and neither of them offer K to 12, so we would have to use both. So we would have to put the wording as Prenda and Kai, not.
I would be very specific because every different type of school may or may not have the same qualifications.
That's fair.
And,
So let's get the motion exactly right.
Yep.
So a motion to ask the lawyer if we can use Prenda or Kai.
And specifically, because we can't use Prenda or Kai, we would have to use both.
Exclusively
Well, as our,
as our.
this fee, yeah, the free.
As our only option.
Instead of sole option.
As our.
Well, I'll say
For
sole,
free and adequate
sole
education.
in parentheses Prenda or guaranteed parentheses Kai, if I go two different scenarios. Right, okay. And then second.
Right.
And just to be clear though, the folks that we talked to at the Department of Education, were none of them lawyers.
I mean, I have spoken to a lawyer at the Department of Ed, I don't remember at this point what that particularly was, and it might have been about this, it was a long time ago, you know, at least a week, so.
Can you repeat it back to
I
the
can look at my
public?
notes to see what he talked about, actually, I can do that.
Can you repeat it back to the public? Aaron, what you wrote?
Well, I asked if any of the folks that she talked to at the Department of Education were lawyers, 'cause I thought that there were lawyers involved in these conversations where they said that we could do this, that was clarifying that with Joey.
So can you repeat the motion?
Oh.
To the public, what you wrote?
Kevin motioned to ask the lawyer if we could use Prenda and Kai micro schools as our sole, in parentheses, Prenda or guarantee, parentheses, Kai option. Jody seconded.
And the vote is,
Oh, and, yeah, I was in favor, yeah, okay, great.
okay, you've been trying to say something for a while. What you got?
Yeah, so I would be concerned, or, Sam was trying to follow the law and all that, and that's all great, but I'm sure you guys are aware that the state of New Hampshire, along with, is it the Commissioner of Education, is that technically what his title is?
Yeah.
Are currently being sued, the trial will hopefully starts, I believe, January 2023, so the idea that like, just things couldn't be sued or things couldn't happen is like, again, sort of idealistic, so I just wanna point that
What's the
out.
commissioner being sued for? What's the commissioner being sued for? I haven't heard this one.
You feel free to look it up, I don't wanna get into it, my point is like to just say that just because you follow A, B, C, or D, there's always loopholes, so somebody can
Okay.
always sue. So-
Anybody can sue anybody.
Right, we couldn't
regardless of-
definitely.
They might lose, but.
Right, we have the state of New Hampshire and somebody in a high ranking position that are being sued, so I'm just pointing that out.
Yeah.
And then just my second question, and maybe this is, I don't know, for Kai and the people, but, so if you have an 11th grader, I don't know, band, soccer, basketball, whatever, where would they do that? So say you have an 11th grader, and we fully implement Brenda, Kai, whatever, where if they band, soccer, I was just at Concord High School.
So you're just asking if sports and arts, those are.
Rob, I was just at Concord High School today, they have like 8 or 9 different,
Yeah, I mean, this question has been asked in previous meetings as well, right? Let's see what Frank stands for.
So generally, our kids would participate in a sport of their school of record. That would be Newport. If we have kids who, on tuition basis, go to other schools, they play on those teams. If we have no schools, and the child is just a Croydon person, and they're even if they're homeschooled or whatever, it is my belief that they can petition to be on, to play for any school, and maybe get permission from the school board, but otherwise they probably have the right to participate in those school of records teams. Now, if a school district does not offer a particular sport, then generally they're allowed to go to a different school district that does have that sport.
I find it terribly detrimental, and not that this makes much difference, sorry for cutting you folks off, that kids, students that have lettered or been part of a program for 3-4 years, in whether it's music, football, wrestling, welding, any of this, have to potentially give that up because of the fiscal ramifications that it might incur on their parents. I just want to throw that out there, do what you want with that info.
Thank you. First, I want to thank the administrator for sticking up for the kids and their teachers. The teachers are kind of left out in left field here. These kids love those teachers. The teachers love their kids. There's something very wrong here. I have tried to understand why a school board, who's supposed to be working for the children in their district, is not supporting a budget that they came up with. It doesn't even make sense to me. And to know when that budget was slashed as much as it was, impossible to do what's been happening here is ridiculous and indecent. It's awful. This board needs to support the budget, the original budget. And then if you want to make sense out of taking a few things off, fine. But not to go with this original budget and work with it, I don't understand that. Okay.
Right, if they do this, Brenda, Kai, does that mean that Newport is still school of record or no longer school of record?
Right.
No longer.
Right.
It would not be. I'm sorry? It would not. I was asking Frank, please.
I don't know the legal answer to that, because I think it depends on whether or not Croydon can appoint or designate Brenda and Kai as their school.
Because the state wouldn't accept it?
So,
The state has to accept, right, they have to, Jody correctly mentioned Rule 306. But there's also RSAs, and they list out all of the standards that a school district has to meet and provide. And if Brenda meets all of those standards, I'm sure this is what the attorney would say, if Brenda meets all of those standards and can guarantee to the school board, because the school board decides, can meet all of those standards, then the school board has the authority to designate that independent organization, school, as their school of record.
So you're saying that the school board has to feel that they are going to meet those obligations?
Right now, even with our partner schools, every year we have to approve those contracts. And when we do that, the school board is making a judgment that they believe that those schools are providing and meeting all of those things. Now, public schools in New Hampshire generally are. Once in a while, there's one that has a problem, and then they have to go into some sort of remediation program to change that. But generally speaking, if you are a school operating in New Hampshire, you have gone through that vetting process, and you have to redo it every 2 to 3 years to say.
I don't think that the board is competent of determining that Prenda would be. Thank you, Frank.
One quick thing though, I mean, neither Prenda nor Kai are schools, so neither of them I would think would fit that definition of a school or whatever. They're a resource that you need.
So Newport would still be school records.
So we actually have resource choice.
Actually, I want to jump in for a second because people online are saying they can't hear anybody there. So I want to set up a microphone and you can all line up and talk into it so people online can hear.
Somebody, the school board has to guarantee that every single child receives what's referred to as FAPE in special education and special needs. And that is a free, appropriate public education, publicly funded education. Okay, so that's the bottom line of it all. And I think that is the big legal question that sits on this table about all the places that people are going to go. And I don't see how an online program can teach welding. I mean, that seems impossible. So somehow the school district then has to make the arrangement that that child gets that free, appropriate education if they want to be a welder.
And then you have these voids that leave you subject to suit. Then you have these voids that are out there that aren't being filled, that are going to lead to potential lawsuits.
Yeah, I mean, that's every family will have to make their judgment about whether they're receiving faith, essentially.
Make sure it's on. Yeah. Okay. I think we all should take a deep breath that we have made some headway today and actually breaking things down. I feel like the discussion's been really good tonight, not just everybody being angry. I have a question that maybe is a little bit small-minded in considering the bigger things we've been talking about. But I just wanted to clarify. So if we do the Prenda pods, the funding from the state is ending in 2 years, as we know of now. So then that would mean that the school districts, if we follow through with this for the next 2 years, going into the third year, we will then have to take on that cost, which I did for like 100 and... So yeah, for 100 and, so for 30 kids, let's say we have in K through 4, it would be like $150,000 increase.
Yeah, 130,000.
130,000 for 24 kids.
24 kids worked out to 120,000.
Okay, yeah, I just did 30 because you had said at some point we were saying 30 kids or something. Okay, so we're already knowing that whatever we do now, we're saying it's very feasible that our costs are going to go up to 1.1, 1.2. I heard you say, Aaron, that we know 3 years from now that's already going to increase again another 1.3, you said, so then we're coming up to easily 1 point.
No, it would go up 0.1, 0.13. Right?
130,000 would be 1.3.
No,
130,000 is 0.13 million.
Okay, yeah, so I guess the point is we're already looking at, yeah, okay, so I hear what you're saying. So the increase is, we already know that whatever we come up with now, it's going to increase in the future. So whatever we come up with now, that plan is not going to be sustainable for the town for many years to come.
What we have seen, though, is the private options that we've used in the past, like Montessori and whatnot, their prices stay much more stable than the public options. Newport goes up considerably year after year, so we can also safely assume that the alternative would increase quite a lot every single year. So the
Okay, I
advantage.
hear what you're saying, but that's not what you mean. You mean that we're gonna have to pay the Friend the price that we're.
Yeah, she's saying this.
Yeah, I'm saying it's gonna increase, you're saying it will increase if we keep the
We're
same model.
making an
Okay.
increase in two or 3 years, which is true, but that increase is 0.1 million, so
Yeah.
not huge, but the other options increase quite a lot as well.
Right.
And private options tend to be a lot more stable over time on their pricing structure. The other thing is that the price structure is variable as opposed to fixed, which means that it's gonna go up and down with child. One more child, you get $5,000. One less, you go down $5,000. You don't have a fixed overhead that you're keeping on the books all the time, regardless of finance. So it's a more favorable cost structure.
Yeah, I know what you're saying. I'm just saying that we all need to, I think, keep in mind too, that even with this plan, there's going to be, even though you're saying it's much more dependable, there is going to be an increase over time with it as well. And we're saying we're already in a deficit spend, so that's looking at next year we would have an increased cost, then maybe we get 1 year of kind of relief of stability, then the following year it's gonna increase again because the Prendo won't be supplemented by the state. So it's just multiple years where there's either gonna be deficit spending that increases taxes or an increase. So I think those that are trying to be like, yay, let's cut things as short as possible, it's still going to increase over time. We're not kind of able to keep things the same.
For sure, it will go up.
Okay.
I mean, the number that was, the budget that was picked was, it is what it is, but basically the deficit spending would be figuring out what is the true cost. And then next year, we'd set a budget around that.
And I also, I know I don't have any kids in school yet, they're still little, that these options is there is no school choice K through 4th, even if there's not like a
there isn't
5,000 to
currently.
right. And I think, what was the number you said if we did go the school choice option, was that 9,000? That brought it up to 1.3?
Well, numbers wise, it was, if I'm remembering correctly, it was like maybe 100,000 more, or maybe between $100,000 and $200,000 more expensive. But the issue was, I couldn't really find a way to have an in-person option for grades K through 3.
But if you offer Prenda as your in-person option and school choice as, like, Prenda
You
was
can't
one
do
option,
Prenda
you can't
and
do
school
both.
choice.
But isn't that one of the options for? Right, but we have school choice for 5 through 12.
That's right.
So even when we have Chi, if we have Chi next year, we would still have school choice. Say you wanted to send your son to Newport, you'd only get 9,000, and you'd have to pay the rest. There would not, we couldn't do that for an option through K through 4.
You could, but you would have to close Croydon Village School.
Okay, because we're running it
You
as.
can't have it both ways. It's just
Right,
very
I
logical.
understand. Okay, that's just what I wanted to clarify, because I feel like it was said and I wasn't catching it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Just a quick question. This is just about the meeting. It's come to our attention that the moderator isn't feeling comfortable attending this unless there's a police detail there. Is that something that you guys are working on?
We did, we've spoken to him on that.
fine.
Is he?
Yeah.
He mentioned, he didn't say, I'm not comfortable being
Okay.
without it. He just said we might need to consider whether it should be.
Yeah.
Okay, and is that something that you guys
He was
are
not
leaning
worried,
towards?
yeah,
I don't.
Kevin, yes, we've spoken to him, or Christian's spoken to him, and he said that there is going to be somebody that's coming that's an off-duty police officer. He said that made him comfortable enough where he's not really worried. And he wasn't worried for himself personally.
No,
He just
yeah,
thought
no,
it'd be nice to have somebody there just in case.
Yeah.
So there will be an off-duty police officer that's.
Do we know who that is?
So-
I mean, it kind of.
Yeah, Jason Holmstrom, I think.
Okay.
So I guess what judicial capacity does an off-duty police officer have?
They have a lot.
I don't think anybody's expecting anything bad to happen.
No, of course not.
Well, but I'm just asking, is an off-duty police officer the same as me walking up and pretending to be a tough guy, or what? Or is an off-duty police officer a police officer? You can't be both. I mean, you can't be a civilian and a police officer at the same time. So which one would they be?
Well, I'm just giving you, like, what Bruce has told us, his opinions on this. He he's comfortable now knowing that there's.
It just makes him comfortable.
Okay,
It's his meeting.
as long as it's,
right?
okay. Well, I guess it's the whole town's meeting, wouldn't it be? Or is it?
It's his meeting to
It's
run.
always the whole town's meeting.
Okay.
But not his own.
All right.
And Jody, can you confirm that the last couple of years, Newport tuition has gone up?
Oh, yeah.
So, we had the recent spike in their tuition, but it's gone up every year before that?
Yeah. I can find that.
Frank?
Yeah, their rate goes up a little bit every year. This past year,
That was a big
it's
one.
taken a sizable jump.
And Sunapee as well, all the other schools go up every year?
Yes, everybody.
So I'll start at,
Everyone stays the same.
sorry.
We just wasn't stressed.
I didn't talk over you, Frank. So I've got the numbers here from the fiscal year ending 2019. It was 13,095, went to 13,422, then it jumped to 15,124, then it went up another 1,000 to 16,079, and then it jumped again to 17,080. So there's been, at least 1,000 to 1,500 jump every year the past 1, 2, 3-ish years.
So their rate next year is a competitive tuition rate to other schools, but they've lost, like everybody else, they've lost student numbers, and so some of that becomes a function of lost state aid as well. So, I mean, our per pupil costs also go up here every year because, changes in revenue or changes in numbers, contracts, and everything you do costs more, so.
Thank you.
I think I have 3 questions. I'll just lean over, I guess. Yeah. So you talked about renting Kai space, because you're going to need to rent space for Kai. You have specifics on what space we're renting and what their internet capability is? No.
I mean, until
So what
everybody's
happens
do
again?
that, right?
What happens again when, we can't find that other unicorn along with the unicorn that we can't find a superintendent, and the unicorn that we can't find a teacher, and the unicorn that we can't find. But what is your plan so far? What is the spaces that you're looking at, and what is their internet capability as of now?
The only people that I've talked to were Camp Coniston and the fire department, and I also reached out to the church, who did call me back, but I haven't spoken to them yet.
And what were their answers?
Camp Coniston can't do it because they don't have winterized buildings. The fire department was interested at first, but then, as we heard in the previous meeting, they don't have fire smoke detectors, and they're worried about insurance and whatnot. Town hall, sorry, I left them out. As far as I know, they're willing to let us use town hall. And I have not spoken to the church yet.
So, I just keep hearing you say that, hey, my budget's pretty simple. But to me, it has more holes in the colander. You don't have, you have a very tiny budget for a teacher that you're never going to be able to fulfill. You have a tiny budget for a superintendent or a principal that you're never going to be able to fulfill. And you're looking for a space that just doesn't exist. So I don't see it, if I'm honest. Is there going to be any out-of-district placements coming up, Frank? Because I thought we discussed that there might be one coming.
It's really hard for me to answer that. I think I will not answer that question.
Okay, so that's a tough one to answer. For those in the room who don't know what an out-of-district placement is, we were talking about using that special education money. That's about $134,000. When you have an out-of-district placement, that gets spent in about a blink of an eye. So that whole trust fund was set up so that if that occurs, we don't get into this horrible, screwy situation of getting into debt and having deficit spending. So there's, I believe, a possibility that that's going to be coming down the pike. Even if it isn't, I don't think it's wise to be dipping into that special education fund to try to just cover our butts like we normally would. Because it's set up for a purpose, and it sounds like a pretty important purpose to me. The other question I have is, we have, Ed 306 talks about art and gym and other required classes. how are Brenda and Kai going to deal with delivering, you know, because we've talked about sports, and sports are great because you can kind of maybe go to Newport if you're lucky, but what happens with delivering all of these arts, music, physical education, which are required by law? How does Brenda and Kai deal with that?
Well, if they deal with it, they do, and if they don't, then the district has to supply something.
We'll just go deficit spending, is it? There's a colander. It's got so many holes, it's not even funny.
This question was asked at the last meeting as well, and, yeah, we either have to provide something, or, you can also, I think it's the Learn Anywhere program, you can get credits for doing, say, art or a physical activity by, you know, if your kid's already in gymnastics or karate or whatever. So there are other ways to satisfy those requirements.
That's true. Yeah.
But we could
That's
also.
the high school level, but
Yeah, high school level, not K through 4.
yeah.
K
Let's
through 4
ask.
don't get credits for their PE.
It's very experimental. We don't really know the answer, and I think every
Learn
time.
everywhere we know about.
Sorry?
Learn everywhere we know about.
Yeah.
What's everywhere we know about?
Learn Everywhere is the name of the program that you can get credit in school for
Right.
your karate class, your gymnastics, your whatever dance classes. You can get that.
No, I know, but
You can get it for math and other things as well. I mean,
we're again not 100% sure that that's going to satisfy the requirements that are legally set up. We're hoping they do, but you know, I think every conversation that I've ever heard you guys come out with is we're kind of hoping that this will fall in
So then
line.
the other thing is innovation schools, so if there are things that we're having a hard time meeting, we can ask for a dispensation on that to not have to meet some of them if we can justify it.
We'll just do some more lessons.
No, that would be not having to do it if we can get permission to do that. That's an innovation school, that's what they call it.
But this is a great social experiment with my children, and I hate it. So this is a huge social experiment that we don't really know. We could try this, or we don't really know. Maybe we'll try this. But this is my children. I'm not into experimenting and trying new things. I want my children to have a normal education, like I had, like the people in this room had, like, I don't know. So I don't see it, and I don't appreciate that you guys are so experimental without definite answers to anything with my children's education, and it really bothers me.
I want to thank Frank for speaking, I think, from the heart about what is important for kids, about what the school system here is now, and what this proposal is sacrificing that we would probably never be able to rebuild. We lose the staff, we lose the kind of village school that we've known. I think it's game playing to say that the village school would stay open. Yeah, the building's open in a completely different, inadequate. I cannot imagine first and second graders in these pods with people who are not professionally prepared to educate. So I want to ask if any member of the board is willing to say that they will stand up on May 7th and support the original budget.
We've been asked this many
We
times
were asked this
also.
last week.
I asked him last
Sometimes people learn more and change their minds.
I haven't changed my mind yet.
I have no idea.
So you don't support it then?
No, I don't.
No, let me clarify.
That's not what I said. Hold on.
Maybe some of you weren't here last week to hear my comments. I don't like this $800,000 thing. I don't think it's gonna work. I don't want to do deficit spending. So the only way I see out of it is for May 7th, the vote to, my preference is not 1.7. I think we should maintain last year's spending and try to work over the next year and have a year of planning to try to see where we can trim things down so that those people whose voices have been put forward of we need to make some cuts, those voices can be heard, but we can also still hear the voices of all the parents, myself included, that still want their kids to go to school as they have been and to continue their education as it has been in the past. My opinion is we need to hear both sides, and we need to do our best to accommodate both sides.
So,
The 800,000 does not do that.
can I jump in? And last meeting, you said if you had to choose between
begrudgingly go for the 1.7.
Yes, I did say
So
that.
to Hope's point, will you get up and publicly at the May 7th tell the collected audience that that is what you support? 1.7 rather than 800,000, if those are your choices.
But that's not the only
I'm
question.
not talking to you.
I understand that,
And
but
I'm
I'm
asking
still
a question, and I'm looking to hear what he has to
So
say.
my intention at the May 7th meeting, barring anybody else putting such a motion forward, is to put a motion forward that we maintain last year's spending. If the end of that discussion results in, no, we don't even want to do that, and we want the 1.7 and that's it, then yes, I will vote for the 1.7. Because I don't think this 800,000 is practical, possible, or at all feasible.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, because as we all know, what the board presents usually goes a long way to the public. So I really appreciate you offering to say that. So thank you. I've been trying to be very patient and write my things down so that I haven't been, okay. A couple comments. First of all, Starlink is great. I have it. It's awesome. Best thing since sliced bread, right? But it is experimental. It could disappear at any time. At any time, it could disappear. So currently, in order to get high-speed internet to support that school with the amount of kids learning remotely or, through an online program, it's here. It runs right along Route 10, and it's only available commercially, and it is $500 a month. So I'm sure we could get it, but internet would cost $500 a month through Consolidated. So Aaron, I don't know if you were aware of that, but I've actually talked to them because, I was debating whether or not to get it because I had to have it. So just budget-wise, you might want to think about that because again, Starlink could disappear anytime. What's that?
If it's available commercially, the school should qualify for that.
Well, they could, but you don't pay $500 a month. The fire station,
That's $6,000.
the fire station does not get a discount.
Yeah.
I know that for a fact.
$6,000, I think, is a reasonable price to pay for fiber internet.
Okay, again, we're so bare bones with the
No, I get it.
budget, I want
I
to
get
make sure that he's aware of that. So Aaron, regarding the budget, you had said that you had allocated $60,000 for rent. Is that rent for Little Red, or is that rent for?
That's great, for grades 5 and up.
Okay, so that's, say, Coniston store decides to turn their store into a school. They get $60,000 a year because that's what you budgeted. Okay.
No, well, this was for all of the micro schools.
Okay,
It
so.
could be as many as 6.
Okay. So, if I decide to open up a micro school at my home, or Jody decides to open one, or you decide to open one, or Kevin, or anybody, and say we only have one, and that's the only option, you get $60,000 a year in rent?
No, I just put an allowance in the budget to have some money there to account for it.
But you could potentially get $60,000 for that.
Isn't that for the mini pods? It's not just for one pod.
Yeah, it's for the amendments,
Yeah.
up to 6 pods.
Okay, so say you have 6. Okay. You get $10,000? I'm trying to understand. If I want to open one up, I would get $10,000
Well, you have
a
to
year.
work it out with each individual location. For
Okay.
example, the town's not gonna charge us to use this if we put a micro school in this building during the day.
Why would they
Are
not?
we sure of that? They have a heating.
I will tell you right now,
If they did,
as
it
a
wouldn't be-
member of the Croydon community for 42 years and attending these meetings, the school is not going to use this for free. They never
are going to, kindergarten, we paid rent for kindergarten here? You had to pay a lot, the heat, everything.
But that's not rent.
Okay, they know that the budget is $60,000.
It's operational costs.
Right.
Well, regardless, we had some money in there for this, and so when we talked to the fire station before they realized their issues, they kind of sort of said, well, just, help cover the costs for the electricity, for the utilities, so it's gonna be different with whoever you're talking to.
Right, so,
They just don't have a plan down here.
piggybacking that, if nobody's willing to work at Little Red, and, that basically just, I mean, we don't have anybody there who's willing to do the Brenda with the kids, right? Again, anybody in town, me, Jody, you, and actually has the ability to open up Prenda in their own home, right? Like, I could have Prenda.
I don't know that would be true under the Brenda's, homeschool model, basically. Community model, that's where, as a district model, I don't think that would be.
But Kai would be able to do it, right? As a Kai, like I can open up a Kai mod in my house.
The community.
Separately from the district running it, yes.
Right, so
But I don't know that you can do that, I don't know that the district would be, I think you would definitely run into some legal problems with that, as far as the district using that model.
So then my question is, the state of New Hampshire is giving $5,000 or $6,000 per student for the next 2 years. Like, do I get paid $5,000 or $6,000 per student?
So the state will give $5,000 per child to cover the cost of the instruction and the curriculum. If you need a location, they will also give you an additional $2,000 per student to go, or I forget if it's per student, it might just be for each pod. Yeah, they give you $2,000 to go towards the location.
Okay.
Sometimes schools that put a micro school in their school don't have an existing room, so they can build something or add something.
Okay, so not only is Prenda and Kai for profit, the person who is actually doing the instruction is for profit as well.
They get paid, yes.
But you're getting, Jody, I mean, think of it, my question and my concern is that you may open up your house to this, and then you're going to be getting rent money. And then you're going to be getting money from the state to educate the kids. I have a problem with that. I have a problem with that. I'm just letting you know, that is my concern as a citizen. That is not what I would want to see at all.
Would you give somebody else to that other than me?
No.
I don't know, I'm just wondering what your question is. Right, you just pointed to me, and I understand that, whatever. That's why I'm asking, because we're general in that.
I am not happy with somebody making money off teaching my kid. It's pretty simple. Okay, and we're not talking about an hourly wage. We're talking about, rent money, price coming in from, money coming in from the state. No. I'm concerned about that. What happens to the white building? Like, we keep talking about Little Red, like, is the white building going somewhere?
No.
Okay, so that would stay there. So when you actually had said 20 to 30 kids, and then you said 30 kids, I'm like, can you imagine 30 kids in Little Red? So you're talking about those two buildings in general?
Correct.
Okay.
That needed a lot of repair, like a lot. Right, so is this in the magical budget as well?
It wasn't in there before.
You know that's in ESSER funds for some of it, right?
I mean, yeah, but it's, but so it is in the budget?
It wasn't in the original budget either.
Okay, well, it's just, it's coming
This
up.
is a future problem, so yes.
We are planning.
I just want to I want to go back to the, Jody, I wrote it down as soon as you said it, the 1.7 was astronomical. That's what you said, the one.
No,
Oh, I wrote it down as soon
I
as.
said if we were to deficit to 1.7 million, our property taxes would go up astronomically.
That is
That's
next
what
year's
I
budget.
said.
Okay, all right, but you heard it. Well, it was them selected here. You think the 1.7 is unreasonable?
That's not what I said.
I'm asking you now, do you think the 1.7?
I think it's too high.
Okay. Aaron, you said that the 936 was a very reasonable budget. Why did you present the 1.7? Why did you not just go with the original budget so that the townspeople would be
Yes,
like,
Aaron and me.
oh, I'm asking both of you. So if you would have gone to the school board meeting, to the district meeting and said, you know what, we don't need to increase it, then maybe, you know, the people who were there would have been like, oh, well, they didn't go up this year. You go from 1.6 to 1.7 that you have never supported. You didn't support it when you presented it then. Like, why? I want to know why you presented the 1.7 and still won't stand behind it. I have asked that almost every meeting and you still haven't answered it. You haven't answered it.
You're asking me why I voted for it?
No, I'm asking why you presented it. I'm not asking what you
Well, you have
voted
to
for
vote
that
for it in
day.
order to present it, so she did vote for it and present it.
But they had to present it in the warrant.
I presented what the budget was. I presented what the changes were. I did the presentation.
So you
Why did I
just-
do that? Because that's what we do, right? I mean.
No,
because it's
you
the
don't.
budget.
Yeah, so you're telling me that somebody told you that you had to present the 1.7? Did Frank twist your arm? Did Beth twist your arm? You didn't come up with a 1.7 as a consensus for the group?
We voted on it, you know that.
So why did you're not standing by it at all? You didn't stand by it?
Correct, right. So as I've explained a few times, since the vote at the district meeting, we started looking more deeply into what's going on and where there's extra money in there. And so that is the reason why I don't still support the 1.7. I also think the 800,000 is too low. I never thought we could do it at that amount. I mean, at 10,000, just because of all the extra costs, right?
So you just, after?
I've said this many times. I've said it many times. I have. Whether you heard it or not is a different question. I'm sure everybody's recorded it. You can go find it, right? But that is the state of it. And I do hope, and I've said this before too, that at the next district, at the special district meeting, that people do try to modify that 1.7 if they're, and bring it down to something that is not as high as that, right? And we talked about, I mentioned one thing last time, and apparently I was low in my ballpark for cutting down the padding. I don't want to completely cut the padding on the tuitioning, but it can be way lower than it is because we have so many kids who go to the private school options that are way less expensive than the public school options, right?
So maybe
That is just one place. There's others, right?
Okay, so maybe I misunderstand how it works on the school board when you're actually working on a budget. But it was my understanding that you spend a lot of time, right? You spend a lot of time working on that budget. You're supposed to be doing your research before then, right? Like you're supposed to stand behind the numbers, like when somebody stands up. You and the rest of the people on the board falsified the, impression. Like you were projecting information onto people that you didn't even know about.
That's absolutely right. So just like, I think you just said this, or maybe somebody else did, so when we present a budget to the town, you kind of trust that we looked into it and everything's good. Similarly, we trust that our administration has been sharing everything with us and giving us the most inexpensive budget as possible. So we trust them, right? But it was only after that we realized that we could have lowered that amount for tuition, as an example. Nobody presented that to us. They're the ones who actually come up with the budget, not us.
Are you, wait, well, I'm still.
Yes. Because I didn't, yes, I was there.
I
totally honest
You did.
budget.
Right, but to be a little more creative, because of the amount that it went up, we could have said, hey, you know what, this year, we could have padded by just this much and not the full amount, right? Isn't that possible?
You didn't have.
We
I
did
remember
have.
having that particular
We
one.
had those conversations.
No, we were there, yeah, we did have conversations about where we could cut things. And how.
And we didn't talk
We
about,
kept it exactly the exact same as the year previous, except for the fact that tuition went up a little bit, like a good chunk, and then a cost of living raise. That's the only two allowances that we made on the budget, because we were trying to skip so much. We put in padding, we could collectively agree to do that. Now, you keep looking at it like, oh, well, we looked at it, and we looked at the budget, and we came up with this new figure. If you really looked that hard, you'd actually have a plan. You don't have a plan.
I want to talk about this particular piece. No, did anybody suggest at our budget discussions that we don't pad for the full number of kids that go to private schools, that we cut for half of them, for example? Nobody talked about that as an option, did we?
I don't know. I think we probably could have said, hey, we could take that out, but that would be
That's
stupid too, because
No,
we've all
it would be
agreed to do
stupid.
that. So why would we take that out?
It was only stupid when we only had 3 kids going to private school, because that could have just changed. But when we suddenly have 20 kids going to private school, that's different. And none of us thought of it. None of
We
us.
put the padding in when there was 20 kids there. This is totally
We continued following the full padding model, instead of realizing that at some point we could have cut back. That, I don't remember ever discussing it. Do you remember discussing that this year, when we looked at the budget?
He's sleeping, so don't wake him up.
Well, we're all falling asleep, honestly, it's late.
So I'm
I
not.
don't know that we discussed removing the padding, but I mean, we certainly all knew the padding was in there.
Yes,
Right, but
thank
that
you.
would have been a place that we could have reduced it.
So
I'm
you
saying
should have
it
brought
was
that
gonna
up when
come
we were planning for it. I think is the point she's trying to make.
The padding, I mean, really only is maybe 200 grand.
Right, so
It's still an
But that's full padding, so that's where I came up with the 100 grand one, let's do half the padding. Then that was what I said, so it could be 100 grand less, and so coming back to the point that you
And
had.
yet you wrote a letter supporting 800,000. That's a big difference than cutting 100,000 out. You supported 800,000 without a single plan. There's a big difference there.
We didn't have time to plan, we didn't know that the town was gonna even vote for it.
I don't believe that's
Gee.
there's no way.
Well, then all the more reason not to support it, Jody. You know, doesn't that make sense? That if you don't have a plan, you shouldn't back it up? I'm just shocked. I'm sorry.
So
I just,
don't we go back to woulda, coulda, shoulda? I think honestly, if you were looking at, look, again, I will say it, we all want to save some money in taxes, right? You have known, you and Aaron both saw our wonderful, interview on you today, very well spoken. I appreciate what your goal is, right? For you, your family, and anybody else who wants to follow it.
Which you
The homeschooling. What video?
What interview, yes?
I'll share it
was
with
it
you.
the Valley News?
No, there's not. This was back in 2020. It was about homeschooling, and it was great, when people want to do that. Present that, right, as one of your, stand up and speak to the people and say, you know what? There are these options available, and if some of these people take it, then maybe we can save some money. You bit off a little more than you can chew with this town, because what you've done is you've actually jeopardized that. People are going to look at it and they're going to be like, no way, right? It, could have been offered as an option and maybe saved, $100,000. And if the kids wanted to do that. But what happened was inexcusable. And for you to just sit there, the amount of respect and trust that this community had in you is just, it's heartbreaking. It's absolutely heartbreaking, Jody. And you still don't support it. Okay.
I do.
That's all I want to say.